Hello. My name is CJ Atkinson, and I'm delighted to say that I am the author of the book, Can I Tell You About Gender Diversity? My pronouns are they, their, and them, and this is just a little Q&A about some of the kind of more usual questions that we get asked when it comes to talking about trans issues, particularly when it comes to talking about trans issues to do with kids. So the first question is, Can I Tell You About Gender Diversity is aimed at children aged 7 and above, their parents and teachers. What would you say to people who argue that children at this age are too young to have to worry about gender issues? So that's a really interesting question because it puts us in a place where we are already deciding what it is that young people think and feel. And in doing that, we're deciding that there is a framework of usual that they must fit in. What we know from research, what we know from evidence that is coming through from doctors who deal with young people who are experiencing sort of questions about their gender, is that some young people from the ages of about 2 are very, very aware of their own bodies and their own minds and how they feel about it. What they don't necessarily have is the language to talk about it. So if we take away this framework where we expect everybody to be cisgendered in exactly the same way as if we take away a framework that expects that everybody's going to be heterosexual and say, okay, instead of expecting these things to be the case, we are going to allow them to be one possible option, then what you start to find is that everybody just gets to relax a little bit. Because statistically we know that about 1% of people experience some kind of gender variance, so that means 99% of people don't. However, that doesn't mean that 99% of people are going to express their gender and think about their gender and think about the world around them in exactly the same way, because that's just never going to happen with people. So the purpose of having a book like this means that if we can start to have these conversations when people are much, much younger, the world starts to be a lot more accepting about what it is to be different from perhaps generations before us had anticipated. So this then means that everybody's just a little bit more relaxed, so that when children get to the ages of 12, 13, 14, start to be teenagers, start to be young adults, they feel like they're in an environment that's going to nurture and support them rather than something that's going to condemn them. We know that trans young people suffer the highest rate of suicide. About 1 in 2 young trans people will consider suicide as an option, and 1 in 3 young trans people, according to the most recent research, are actually going to attempt to commit suicide. This is staggering and it's upsetting and it's distressing. So rather than thinking, oh, it's a negative thing to start having conversations about it, we really need to start thinking, actually not talking about this is more damaging. Because if there is silence about an issue, if there is fear that a young person has to face about whether or not they can bring something up, then that's going to keep on and kind of escalate throughout their lives. The book is not about telling people that gender doesn't exist. It is not about telling people what gender they are. If you were assigned female at birth and you identify as being female, then that is amazing. Exactly the same as if you were assigned male at birth and you identify as being male. That is brilliant. You are not wrong. Everything about that is great. But we need to be aware of the fact that we live in a world where that's not going to be the case for everybody, and just start to have conversations about that so that everybody gets to feel safe and comfortable.